From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
You're listening to the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast, the show that proves no one stumbles upon success ever. With your host, Lou Need. Every Mondays and Thursdays, we deliver cold hard evidence behind the power of a robust morning routine. Get ready to be transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Hello, morning enthusiasts. Welcome to the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lou Need, and today I am elated to have Martha here with us today. She is a trailblazer in microbiome research, driven by her late husband's 2002 Parkinson diagnosis. She wanted to master chemistry, microbiology, and genetics, and she found the Bio Collective and Biotic Quest. Now, she is shaping gut health science and chronic disease prevention across the globe, with patients in scientific publication and over $1.2 million in NIH grant. And so Martha is onto something, and her contribution to wellness is so significant that she has the backing of the NIH. So this is huge. I'm really excited to have her on here and tell you about her story and how she is shaping this space. So with no further ado, Martha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today, Dr. Lanid. I'm looking forward to telling my story.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Now, I know we talked briefly offline about your husband, and that's how this whole thing got started for you. And I know you recently lost him. So go ahead and tell us about that journey and how he's inspired you to continue to go on.
Sure. So I actually came from a business background. So my undergraduate degree was in accounting, and I went to work in an accounting and consulting firm. And in that process, I was trained as an auditor, and they teach you, like, never believe anything anybody tells you. You have to examine the evidence for yourself. And they also taught us an approach for looking at a business from a systems perspective. So if you want to look at business risk, you're following everything that flows through the business and looking for those potential breakpoints. Well, fast forward to 2002, my young husband was only 44 years old. We had 3 children. Our youngest was 2, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And it just seemed kind of crazy to me because he had been a health enthusiast, a marathon runner, never did anything that was unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And so, and you go to the doctor and they just kind of go, oh, you have Parkinson's and here's a pill. We'll see you in 6 months. And that's it. There's really nothing you can do. It's a long, slow trajectory down. And I didn't really like that. So I kind of took I'm not going to take what somebody says at face value. I'm going to start digging in and researching. And really the very next day, I was out, digging in, looking at books. And I started with the food because I knew, okay, if I'm going to kind of do my approach of transaction flow, I'm going to look at, like, what are the main things going through the body? And I mean, what are we made of? We're made of what we eat. So I started studying the food supply and how the food was grown, the chemicals that were used on it, and all of these different things that could have potentially contributed to him getting Parkinson's. And, for the 2 years leading up to his diagnosis, he had been drinking this protein shake, a soy protein shake every day. So I spent a lot of time looking at soy, the soy industry, how all of that's grown and genetically engineered. And, I kept thinking in the back of my mind, there's got to be some way to connect all this stuff that we're genetically engineering in the plants to what's going on in humans somehow. Yeah. And, in 2014, so that was 12 years later, I read a book called Missing Microbes by Dr. Martin Blazer. And he was talking about the rise in chronic disease and the use of antibiotics and something called the microbiome. And I was like, what's this microbiome? And that, I think you talked about this before on your show, but the microbiome is the trillions of bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live in and on our body. And they function as our internal pharmacy. I mean, we're really more microbial than we are human in terms of gene function. So that made a lot of sense to me too, because I also knew from years of talking to people with Parkinson's that many of them had taken repeated courses of antibiotics. And that, of course, is going to have an impact on those gut bacteria. Mm-hmm. So later that year, a researcher in Finland, Dr. Philip Schupperhans, came out with the first publication that showed he could divide. So there's two primary types of Parkinson's. One is with a tremor, and the other is where they have more of a stooped posture and trouble walking. And he could divide those two groups of patients by the bacteria in their gut. It was very specific. And I was like, that's it. That's like the general ledger in accounting. And I quit my job and started funding some research at the University of Chicago and went on to found my company, the BioCollective, about 6 months later with Dr. Jack Gilbert and Dr. Suzanne Vernon. And we started building a biobank of fecal samples of across the population, but we obviously had a focus on Parkinson's. But I also had this. So my co-founder, Jack, has a son with autism, and our co-founder Suzanne had spent 20 years looking at chronic fatigue, and we saw some similarities in the microbiome profiles. And so we started talking about, like, maybe we shouldn't be looking at things as like we call something a single disease, but it's really more a loss of function in the gut microbiome that's contributing to that, and it presents in different ways, depending on the weaknesses of the person. So we were looking to kind of look on a broader scale at what the problems people were having. So, we launched that company in 2015 and spent 7 years collecting fecal samples and got a grant from NIH. Well, one of the interesting things in the process of collecting samples is the people in the lab who were processing those samples for our bank. They actually told me after several months, they said, I can tell if someone has Parkinson's just by looking at their stool. It is so different from everyone else's. And it's not in the published literature. And it's taken me, another 7 years, but I'm actually working with a researcher in Australia on a publication about Parkinson's that is going to tie out what's going on in the battle in the gut between the good and bad guys and how that contributes to basically the spilling out of calcium and potassium that makes this colloidal stool mass that makes it hard to get nutrition out, can't get water in, and it's difficult to pass. So that's kind of a long story from there to here. And then, so after the process of collecting all the samples, then we started to look at how could we make probiotics that could actually restore some of these lost functions.
Yeah. And then having the right enzymes, right? The digestive enzymes to absorb the nutrients that we're putting in. So what you're seeing so far is a lack of it with the patients.
Yes. Well, it's a loss of diversity, loss of, some of the key enzyme producers, actually.
Yeah.
So you get an imbalance of pathogenic bacteria to the beneficial bacteria. And, we're seeing a loss in the organisms that produce the B vitamins, and a number of the digestive enzymes ultimately cause these problems. And then some of there's a handful that we've seen in the Parkinson's microbiome that produce an enzyme called urease. And that urease, that production happens at body temperature. And that's what kills the good bacteria that then spill out calcium and potassium that causes an electrolyte balance in that concrete-like stool.
Wow. It all goes back to the gut and what we're putting in our body. Now you're saying that is how the body's processing what we're putting in. So it doesn't even matter if we're putting in healthy stuff. It's not receptive to it. It's not breaking it down as it should. That's so a lot of the microbiome research is showing you specifically right now. That's incredible to know this.
Yes. And then you get from the gram-negative bacteria, you get a production of something called endotoxin. Mm-hmm. And that is a contributor to what we call leaky gut. And, you get these proteins that cross over the gut lining and cause inflammation and can cause autoimmune disease. And these endotoxins, what's so interesting about, there are animal models in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS, diabetes. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, where they use endotoxins to actually cause the disease profile in the animal model. So it just becomes more and more important to understand that balance in the gut and eliminate those endotoxins and get back the good bacteria that are making those really critical enzymes for our vitamins, hormones, and neurotransmitters.
Mm-hmm. And so I assume you have a whole product line that helps with putting that good health back in to help digest and the probiotics and all that we need. Talk about some of the stuff that you do provide that people are not even aware of.
Sure. So the first product I made was, we weren't even thinking we were going to make probiotics other than to make one for my husband, John. So we went to a Parkinson's conference in Portland, Oregon in 2016, and there were some researchers there who were showing in an animal model that the sugar alcohol mannitol could stop the aggregation of the proteins that are associated with Parkinson's called alpha-synuclein and could actually pull them out of the brain and clear them, which is what we normally do when we sleep, is clear that trash out of the brain. So this particular group was called Clinic Crowd, and they were getting people with Parkinson's just to take oral mannitol. But that can cause some digestive issues, gas, and I came back and bought a mannitol chemistry book and started looking at that and discovered, there's some bacteria that actually make mannitol by converting glucose and fructose, which we know we have way too much of in our Western diet. And so I sat down with a fermentation chemist friend of mine and I said, could we, what we're looking at in our data is seeing that we're losing the key bacteria that can do all these different functions. Can we put a team together that will work as a team to do what we want? So that's where the first idea of what we now call sugar shift. And there's definitely, so a number of the bacteria that we've seen associated with Parkinson's are involved in sugar metabolism. So we formulated Sugar Shift to convert the glucose and fructose into mannitol in the gut, which we don't use, but it's a prebiotic. So it feeds a broader profile. And then in our research, we saw it increased the bifidobacteria, which is depleted in Parkinson's, and we lose bifidobacteria as we age. It's also damaged by COVID. So we saw that increase in the bifidobacteria and some of the other key organisms that are declining. So something called Roseburia and another one called Faecalibacteria. We saw those increasing. And John actually at the time had been walking with a cane, and a month later, he wasn't walking with a cane. He was able to navigate through a crowd, and we were testing and seeing how his microbiome profile was shifting back closer and closer to the human.
Its natural state.
Yeah, healthy human. And so we went on to actually study it. We did a trial in diabetes because we knew it was affecting glucose metabolism, and that has much easier endpoints to measure than Parkinson's does. And so we did a clinical trial in diabetes where we had good results in fasting blood glucose, postprandial blood glucose, triglycerides, something called HOMA-IR, which is a measurement of insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance. And we didn't, in the first 90 days, which is what the clinical trial was, we didn't see a change in HbA1c, but at the end of that double-blind trial, we unblinded and kept a subset of the people who had been taking it on the product for another 90 days. And then we saw that HbA1c drop. And that makes sense because it takes about 120 days for those blood cells to turn over. And so you're probably not going to see that in that time window. But we're working on a publication of the changes in the microbiome. And some of the ones that we're so most excited about is a drop in those lipids that are associated with those endotoxins I mentioned. So 100% of the people in the trial had a reduction in serum endotoxin in the blood. And then it showed up in the microbiome that supported that as well. And then we also had over 900% increase in detoxification enzyme pathways like cytochrome P450. And that's a key enzyme for the breakdown of like environmental toxins. Mm-hmm. And we think that's partly due to the fact we have our own Lactobacillus plantarum that we put in all of our formulas that can actually break down glyphosate using something called the third pathway. And that breaks it down to phosphate, water, and hydrogen. And many other microbes can sort of break that down. And if people don't know what glyphosate is, that's like Roundup. It's used in a lot of farming operations, and it's very detrimental to the microbiome. And so our strain can break that down without causing other toxic byproducts. There are other bacteria that can break it down, but it will often produce a toxic byproduct called AMPA.
Yeah. Let's talk about the toxic products and what we're consuming and what we're putting in the body. Because I know initially you started by researching or looking into the soy protein that your husband was taking for 2 years straight before his diagnosis. I want to find out if you found any correlation after 8-10 years later. Did you find any correlation between the soy and his diagnosis? And then chime into what how we're getting these toxins into our body inadvertently, like just by buying regular food or the packaging or however it's done.
Right. So what I did find in 2014, I wish this researcher would actually update his research, but his name is Andre Leu, Leu, and he did a research study where he showed the data in the United States, the amount of GMO soy, GMO corn, and the use of glyphosate, which is an organophosphate herbicide. And he showed the trajectory of that overlaid with about 20 different diseases for the, I guess it was a 20 plus year period from 1997 when that was introduced all the way to 2014 when he published the paper. And I know people say correlation is not causation, but if you have 20 different diseases where the trajectory is highly correlated to an environmental herbicide that is increasing in the environment, then it's definitely something that you need to pay close attention to. And that particular herbicide, the history of it goes back, organophosphates go back to World War II as neurotoxins. And then after the war, they were trying to figure out, okay, how do we use these? So, and there are also organophosphate insecticides that are also used in the farming industry. And so those have an impact on the bacteria in our gut. And that's one of the ones that I am most focused on. But there are so many different chemicals used in the food supply. As an example, you mentioned enzymes and the importance of digestive enzymes. Well, we often think that packaged foods or prepackaged fresh foods, whether that's a container of hummus or packaged pre-cut vegetables or, anything like that, people will often think of those as being healthier. But what they don't think about is in order for them to be produced, go through the supply chain, sit on the shelf, you buy them, they put preservatives on them. And many of those preservatives are actually what are called anti-enzymatic. So they stop the enzymes from working so they won't break down the food in the store. But of course, you want that food to break down in your body so that you can access the nutrients. So if you're eating a lot of foods that have anti-enzymatic preservatives on them, they're obviously going to have a big impact on your microbiome and, ultimately on your ability to digest the food and access the nutrients.
That is scary. Thank you for breaking that down so easily, because it's designed to preserve it, but it also is working too well. Because once we get it in, it doesn't break down in our system. And so that can backlog. That creates all the gut issues, right? And you're not clearing out the system properly. And I know you collected a lot of fecal samples. Let's talk about the importance of going.
Yes, actually, I talk about that a lot. And my kids used to tease me. They called me the poop queen. But, I don't think people realize, because often they've been constipated almost their whole life. So, and I'll use my husband as an example. When he was very small, I guess he was having trouble going to the bathroom even back then. And his mother used to bribe him with little stuffed animals to try to get him to go number 2. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder, even back then, if he had hard, large stools and it was just painful to go, or I don't know. But if you just think about it, when I very first started my company, I was out on a hike and I met this couple and they asked me what I did. And I told them I was collecting poop, and they were sort of laughing, but they had their dog with them. And they said, "Oh, that makes so much sense, because that's how we know if our dog is healthy. We look at the dog's poop every day when it poops." Right. And it's so interesting because humans,
we don't look at it. We don't talk about it.
Maybe they don't look at it. It's like, okay, I'm just going to flush that and not look. Oh. But the Bristol Stool Scale, which is a score of 1 to 7 that is used oftentimes to, as one measure of how healthy your stool is. You want it to be kind of in the middle in that 3 and 4. But I actually think, learning from our stool collection process, there's a much wider variety than just those 7. And we had everything from someone who ate an all milk diet for 30 days that had only white poop to, and this isn't talked about a lot, often people with Crohn's, most of their stool is mucus. So, they have a lot of issues as well. But it's just very important to get rid of the waste, because there are, like, back to the toxins, these bacteria produce toxins as they die off their cell wall, and so the longer that waste sits inside your body, the more your immune system is having to deal with those toxins. Mm-hmm. So while you don't want the transit to be too fast, because then you're not absorbing the nutrients, but, you want to be able to be moving your food out daily. And, sometimes I tell people you can kind of test that by just eating a beet and seeing if, you get some red poop within 24 hours, then you're probably moving at the right pace.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, changing the color. Yeah. I know you're very busy. You're running 2 major companies, the BioCollective and Biotic Quest. Tell us about Biotic Quest a little bit, and I want to know how you manage both.
Well, so Biotic Quest is the probiotics brand. So that is, we have 6 different products. We talked about the sugar shift product. We have an immune product, a product you take after antibiotics to help restore the gut. We have a sleep product, a heart product, and we have a yogurt starter. So a lot of people like to you can actually make yogurt from any of our formulas, but my 2 sons help me in that business. And so they do a lot of the day-to-day operations, and I do the education part of that. On the research side of things, we are not collecting fecal samples anymore. We stopped doing that in 2022 with COVID, because we were collecting live samples and we just felt like we didn't want to take that risk anymore and we had enough data. So on the research side, it's a lot more just related to collaboration with different researchers, sharing our data, looking at our strains and seeing if there are other ways that we can either help other people develop products or develop products of our own, and using our computational modeling to help put that together. So it doesn't take quite as much time as the probiotics business does now. But, a big part of what I do is education. So I'm out on the road speaking to people. I just got back from the Weston Price conference, just trying to educate people on the importance of the microbiome, how critical it is to your health, and how, we really need to focus on our microbiome health, because that's the base of our overall health.
Yeah. Tell me about the healthy balance that you've established for your personal life, for your professional life, having to run on both business. I know your boys are helping you, but being on the road and how you manage.
Well, I'm pretty good at scheduling my time so that I don't do too much travel. I live on a farm, so I get up every morning. I'm an early riser, so I get up at 5:30 typically in the morning while it's still dark. I sit outside while the stars are still up in the sky, and I have my quiet time, whether I'm saying prayers or just being grateful for what I have in this world and all the people who have helped me get where I am. And then I take a walk as the sun is rising. I walk every morning. It's about 3.5 to 4 miles that I take every day. And that kind of sets my day off right. And then I'm kind of sitting down and laying out to make sure that I haven't overscheduled myself. I used to not do a great job of kind of starting the day. And I love that your focus is getting the day started right. Because if you don't do that, you can get a little scattered. And because there are people from, different areas that I'm dealing with, making sure the calendar's combined, I'm not overstressed, I'm not overbooked. So I try to set the day right by being grateful and just making the plan for the day.
It's a beauty the way the morning routine works, because you do it for you, but it actually, everyone else around you benefits from it, because then you show up your best self, right? You show up with the right energy, and you can guarantee the day will get hectic, but you are almost like grounded. And so you won't be shifted too easily.
Yes. Stay calm.
Yeah. In the midst of it all, it helps you stay calm. And so it's powerful in that way. And for you, it's not a lot. Your gratitude journal, saying you're thankful, right? Just sitting in the quiet and in kind of giving yourself that space to process, to prepare for the day. I do like the walk. That's a long walk. Good for you for doing that daily, 3.5 to 4 miles. You're out there for 30, 40 minutes. It's pretty amazing that you can get that in. And it does give you energy.
It does. And I definitely, when I'm on the road and I don't have that walk time, I notice the difference.
Yeah. And it also helps because I know we have a 2-year-old and today's her birthday actually. And so thank you. And we used to move her legs when she couldn't go to the bathroom by herself as an infant, right? So we're talking about that mobility, and we're going back to that bowel movement, the importance of moving the body. It's crucial, and that helps. It's like getting up, going out for a walk, get things moving internally. I'm a runner, a marathon runner, and I knew like if I didn't take care of business before I go out for a run, mid-run, I would have issues.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So it's just mobility to kind of correlate back to the gut and the bowel movement and healthy bowel movement and daily bowel movement. It really does do that. If you don't want to do it for anything else, making sure that you can release yourself daily will lead to domino of effects, beautiful ones.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing. Anything else that you want to share about your morning routine?
Well, I always start with a big glass of water.
Yay,
so.
There it is. You gotta hydrate, right? Because you're talking about going to sleep and clearing the brain, the biomes, removing a lot of that stuff, and the water does help clear the brain, the brain fog, as we put it so simply. But it does a lot more.
Yes.
Yeah, rehydrating first thing in the morning. Martha, thank you so much for sharing. It's really been a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Lunid.
Of course. Before we drop off, let's talk about how we can connect with you. Where can we find the Biotic Quest? Where can we find the collective? Like, where are you on social media?
So you can find our probiotics on our website, which is biotiquest.com. So that's BIOTIQUEST.com. They're also available on Amazon. So you would just search Biotic Quest probiotics. And I actually have a personal blog called Martha's Quest, where I write about Parkinson's and alternative therapies for Parkinson's and the gut microbiome in Parkinson's. And then you can go to The Bio Collective. That's TheBioCollECTIVE.com. Hope I spelled that right. Bio Collective. And that gives you the history of the research that we've done, the steps along the way. You can see a little bit about the kit that we used to collect samples. And if you want to know more about the grant and what we did there, a lot of that scientific story is told on the Bio Collective.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing. We'll add those on the show notes for sure. Thanks for coming, Martha. It's nice having you here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, morning enthusiasts, that's it for today's show. Thank you for tuning in. If you love the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast, we'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes or Google Play. While you're at it, tell a friend about the show. Be sure to visit bestmorningroutineever.com and our Facebook group to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic free bonus content. Until next time.
Hey, this is Dan Harris, host of the 10% Happier podcast. I'm here to tell you about a new series we're running this September on 10% Happier. The goal is to help you do your life better. The series is called Reset. It's all about hitting the reset button in many of the most crucial areas of your life. Each week, we'll tackle a topic like how to reset your nervous system, how to reset your relationships, how to reset your career. We're going to bring on top-notch scientists and world-class meditation teachers to give you deep insights and actionable advice. It's all delivered with our trademark blend of skepticism, humor, credibility, and practicality. 10% Happier is self-help for smart people. Come join the party.